WHPR TV is now on demand. Catch us when you want, how you want, where you want. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Watch your favorite TV shows on demand. And be sure to download the WHPR app. We're now on demand at your demand. WHPR TV Detroit on demand.com, a Watkins Broadcasting Company.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Law Power Hour. Today I have a familiar face to many of you in Detroit. Mr. Cliff Woodard is here with me today. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Attorney Keller. I'm glad to be here with you this evening.
You know, you have your own show, and it's a big effort on your part to come over and make a commitment to me, and I really appreciate it.
Whenever Attorney Barry Keller gives the call, you got to step forward.
Well, you know, it's really important that we meet today because we have a very important mission. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to you about it before the show. 4th of July is right around the corner. And what's the best thing that we can do for our audience? Give them advice on how to stay out of trouble on a holiday weekend and each and every other weekend during the year.
Yes.
Now, I know you do a lot of criminal work. Is that correct?
About 98% criminal, yes.
And isn't it amazing that after every weekend that phone starts to ring off the hook, you get a lot of inquiries, a lot of calls?
Anywhere from people who had just a little bit too much to drink, or they've, because of they had too much to drink, they've gotten into fights, a whole gamut of problems people encounter on a daily basis, especially the weekends, though.
You know, one of the baseline issues that I try and get the message home on is the first thing, if you go out on the weekend and you've got people riding in the car with you, make sure you know those people.
Absolutely. In fact, it's interesting that you mentioned that because just before I came over here, I have a trial that's supposed to start day after tomorrow on Thursday. Young man was riding in the car with two of his homeboys, and he's facing felony firearm, felon in possession, because he didn't know that a gun was in the back seat. Now, Barry, he drives a Chevy Trailblazer. I'm pretty confident that I could convince the jury if it was a 9mm or a 38. But it was an AK-47 that was supposedly on the back floorboard. And I asked him, I'm like, do you really think that I'm going to be able to convince the jury that you didn't see your friend get in the car with this gun? And after talking to him for maybe 25 minutes or 30 minutes today, he sort of moved me away from you really need to work this out to maybe we can go to trial because of what you just said. You've got to really know the people that you're getting in the car with. And he didn't necessarily know this person that well, but he knew that he might be capable of doing that. So, as you said, you got to know the folk that you're hanging with. And sometimes it's not just a gun. It could be a lady in her purse, you know, who you don't know that she might like to smoke a little bit or things like that. You know, you really got to be careful.
And you are charged, aren't you, as the driver of the car, like the captain of the ship? You're responsible for everything that goes on in the car.
Yeah, you know that. That statute is exactly, you're quoting it exactly right. You are presumed to know and be in possession of everything that is in your vehicle. Yes, sir.
So what's the best advice you can give to people not to alienate their friends and maintain good relationships?
Well, you know, see, Barry, after you've been doing criminal for so long, I'm blunt. I have no filter. I don't really care about whether or not you need to alienate your friends. These are not your friends if they wind up jamming you up because he has a co-defendant. And the co-defendant is not stepping up saying, "Oh, you know what? That was my AK-47. Detective, don't send my friend the driver to jail. It was my gun." Now, if that person isn't doing that, is that really your friend?
No.
So I don't care about alienating friends, because these are not the people that you need in your life anyway. That if they're going to bring contraband or weapons in your vehicle and don't have the courtesy to tell you.
One of the most amazing things to me is that people lose sight of the fact that they shouldn't get behind the wheel if they've been drinking, driving, or smoking.
You're right, and we no matter how many programs and what's the other word I'm looking for? Messages that we try to get out to people about not drinking and driving, or calling Uber, or Drive Alive. All of those, there are some people that still do it, and really, those are the people who, if you get right down to it, have a problem with alcohol. Because heaven forbid you've ever been there, and I've never been there, but if you have actually gone to court for a drinking and driving offense, you know that you've got to pay a lawyer at least $5,000. Well, if they're with you, it's probably 15. But
come on now, we're here to help people.
But you pay your lawyer whatever you got to pay him. Then you've got probation costs. Then you've got fines. Then you've got court costs. Your driver's insurance rate triples. You've got 4 points on your record. That is not something you want to do twice.
And if you become a habitual.
And if you wind up doing that again, you know that person has a problem with alcohol. And so that's really more the underlying problem.
One of the most interesting questions that people ask me is if I'm driving the car and I have a medical marijuana card, and I get pulled over, and they accuse me of driving under the influence of drugs, is my medical marijuana card a defense? Now, what's your answer?
No, it is not a defense. A medical marijuana card does not give you the right to drive impaired. Now, where the law is somewhat in a gray area is how much THC, which is the active ingredient in marijuana, how much of that is in your bloodstream at the time that you are driving. And that's still very much up in the air, and it's working its way through the appeals court, and it'll probably wind up at the Supreme Court level. But that still is a concern for other drivers out here as well. No, marijuana doesn't affect people like alcohol could, but it affects drivers very similar to the way we perhaps text and drive. Texters, or people who are on their iPad, no names mentioned, when they drive, tend to actually slow down, I've noticed. And I'll say, when I've done that before, I'll look at my speedometer, and I'm no longer driving with traffic. I've actually slowed down because my focus is actually not solely on the road anymore. And I can't tell you the number of times I've whizzed past a cop, and I've actually thanked God that I was looking at my phone rather than driving, because I tended to slow down. I'm not saying that that's a scientific study that everybody does that, but it's still what they call, distracted driving. And the marijuana tends to have people be a little bit more relaxed and somewhat euphoric, which could be a danger to others on the road.
Well, there's a new test out. I was just reading the newspaper about the saliva test.
Right.
And it's experimental. We've got a call coming in. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I was calling. We can't get you on TV, on the computer or the phone. What's going on? There's nothing wrong with the system?
Well, we're going to have it checked out. Thanks for calling in, and we'll let them know right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Apparently, some of our viewers are having trouble getting us on the TV. We're going to continue to broadcast, and if we get another call.
Yeah, I'm sure the producers back there will take a look at that and get that. HT somewhere around in the building. This is like homecoming for me.
Well, getting back to our issue. Now, this new saliva test, are you familiar with it, where they can take a piece of gauze and they can
Right. I have not read to the extent my colleague Michael Cormone knows that whole medical marijuana issue backwards and forwards. So I haven't paid too close attention to how that saliva test works.
Okay, let's try this scenario.
Sure.
I'm driving. I get stopped. I'm glassy-eyed, cannot smell alcohol on me. So they want to give me a saliva test. Do I have to consent to it?
Now, see, I don't know about the saliva test, but the Supreme Court just ruled the other day with respect to blood tests and the PBTs. And no, they cannot compel you to do a PBT. They can, of course, compel you to do a blood test by seeking a warrant. But a lot of states were then giving sanctions if you no longer wanted to comply with the PBT, which is a preliminary breath test, which is, of course, different from the blood. But the U.S. Supreme Court put the kibosh on the PBT sanctions. No, you cannot do that, and there cannot be any repercussions for those preliminary breath tests. So I would probably want to say no. I'd have to look at that, but I hope that there would be no sanctions because saliva contains the DNA. And I would hope that a court would look at that as invasive. Because wouldn't that be similar to taking your fingerprints without a warrant?
More likely than not, but I want to stop for a minute and ask you about the implied consent law in Michigan. Are you saying that's no longer effective?
No, I didn't say that. The implied consent goes with the blood test, doesn't it? As opposed to the PBT.
It goes with both. When you're stopped, you've got to consent to the PBT test. If you don't consent to the PBT test,
Well, yeah, but that's not a sanction in terms of jail. That's your license.
that's what I'm talking about.
Right,
I
which
didn't
you don't
want
have.
our viewers to get
Okay.
confused.
All right.
So there are sanctions, but those have to do with your driving privilege.
Correct, which is a privilege. Yep.
Right. So the Supreme Court did not touch that issue. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. Just want to clarify.
Okay. Glad we got that straight.
Okay. So now sometimes us lawyers have to communicate with each other to make sure
We're
that
on the same page.
Oh, we got
Gotcha.
that out right.
All right.
Well rehearsed. Now, getting back to the issue here, if I'm driving, I get stopped, and I don't consent to the test because I say it's a violation of my constitutional right because of the DNA issue, I might have a legitimate claim, correct?
I would think you would, yes.
Now, that's the kind of issue that's going to have to go up through the courts, isn't it?
Yes. Which would take years.
We're going to take a break for a minute. We'll be right back. Please call in if you have questions because we're going to engage in this for the next 45 minutes, and we want you to chime in with us. Thank you.
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? Or just have general legal questions? Watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. Know your rights. Watch Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law, Tuesdays at 5 p.m. here on WHPR, Detroit Live.
You know, one of the biggest problems that occurs on weekends and more often occurs on holiday weekends are issues of domestic violence. Now, what's your best advice on how to avoid a domestic violence situation?
Stop drinking. Are we talking both sexes, the
Both sexes, because either or can be charged with domestic
right.
violence.
Stop drinking. Wives, do whatever your husbands want. You know, if he wants a beer, get him a beer. If he wants to, watch the game, let him watch the game. No,
Okay,
he's never gonna have me back on his show.
well, suppose she wants you to mow the lawn and you don't want to do it. Come on now.
Wait a minute, you and I, we would just make a call and go get the lawn guy.
No. Or plant some flowers. I mean, I'll go wherever you want to go. Okay, or go out and do the barbecuing. Let's be realistic for a minute. It works both ways.
You rather be on the grass with a lawnmower rather than a golf club? Nah.
At this point, I'd rather smell the grass than be looking at it.
But no, people just really need to get along, and a lot of these domestic violence issues, I would argue, are rooted in two things. One, alcohol, and two, typically third parties. And that's where you see a lot of it, especially within Detroit and Wayne County. If you trace back a lot of where this domestic violence between couples comes from, there's always a third party, or if I use the urban vernacular, a side piece around somewhere. Whether or not it's another woman, and then the woman at home in the house with the man is getting into it, or the guy thinks that his girlfriend or his wife is tipping out with somebody else, and then those where these clashes happen. And so you leave the alcohol alone, or you either decide you're not going to be together, or you sit down and say, yes, this is what I'm doing, can you deal with this? But other than that, you'll continue to see these type problems.
Well, one of the things that I observe is that most of these domestic violence seem to spill over on the weekend when people have time to be around each other, because during the week they're too busy working. So they don't have enough time to get into it. And my best suggestion is stay away from each other.
See, and that's interesting, because I think that comes, and this is why I'm glad we're having these kind of conversations, because you see things from a different prism. Because I see it from the Detroit being in Frank Murphy and 36 every day. And when you have unemployment rate in Detroit is about 35%, most of these people don't have a job, Barry. They got, and that's why you see a lot of the conflict, because they are in their faces every day, just like you were saying, but they're at home, and they have time to nitpick with each other. They don't have a job to go to.
Oh, I see quite often in the clinics that I work in Southwest Detroit.
Okay, so you are down here. Okay.
I spend a lot of time down here.
All right.
But the real issue is how to avoid domestic violence, because it's a very serious problem.
I think also people need to step back and learn to communicate with each other. Just talk to one another. And again, if you can't get along with that person, just don't wait till it gets to that point where you're stepping into people's faces. A lot of these other issues are deep-seated from the standpoint that you will have, and this could be a topic for another couple of shows, but you'll have a woman who is involved in a relationship who did not necessarily grow up with her father in the house. So she doesn't necessarily know how to react to a man in his, I will say, role. And if he grew up in a home where there was a mother and a father, then he's going to want to assert himself in some issues. And then when Chris Rock used to say something a long time ago in one of his stand-up routines, and it was so poignant and apropos. He said, on Sundays, you can't be going to the crack house and she going to the Lord's house. You can't be going here and she's going there. In essence, you've got to be kind of on the same page.
There has to be good synergisms.
Exactly. Right. And so if those two people in that relationship aren't on that same page, then you're going to have that conflict. And so you need something to unite them. whether it's counseling, whether it's, going to the same, religious institution, or like you say, both of you go get a job so you're apart from each other for 8 hours a day, and then you use that limited time because you actually miss each other. I don't know. But those are the ways that I would recommend that you stay.
If you're both going to go to the beach, I'll make it real simple. And you like to fish, and she likes to read books, get her a nice lawn chair, set her up, take your fishing pole, and be in the same area.
Okay.
Then you're doing your thing, she's doing her thing, and when you leave, you can talk about the one that got away, and she can tell you about the interesting book she's reading.
Exactly. Even when you live in the same house, the man can have his little man cave in the basement. Where he has his little card tables and his bar and the big screen TV to watch the game and all of those things. And she can be in another part of the house with whatever it is that she likes to do. But you're right.
Yeah, so that requires communication, though, to establish the relationship. And the biggest problem is no communication. That's how these hostile situations occur. Isn't that true?
It is. It is. Something I learned when I was 19, I used to call it HTC. The three things that you need in any successful relationship: honesty, trust, and communication.
Well, as I understand, your parents were married for a long time, weren't they?
Yep, they are headed towards 58 years. They got 57 and a half in the tank right now.
And my parents made 60.
Really?
Yes.
That's fantastic. In fact, I'm going down to see them this coming Saturday.
Both of your parents, you grew up in Detroit, didn't
I
you?
did. I did.
Yeah. Your mother was a teacher, wasn't she?
Yes, she was a teacher, and then when she finally retired, she was a principal at Fisher Middle School. And so, I got a good grounding of education and English and writing. And my father was a mailman, and we used to go visit him all the time on his mail route. Those were some good, we all have fond memories of our childhood.
One of the things we have to talk about is that juveniles have problems over weekends and holiday weekends quite often. They can get into mischief and get into trouble with their neighbors. We've got to give the parents some advice on how to monitor the children. And I use the word monitor. Would you agree with me?
I do. But they need to go back to the way it was when we were kids. Barry, did you grow up under the 3 spanking rule at any point in time?
No, I grew up under the barber's belt rule.
See, that was one of those spankings. Now tell me if this ever happened to you. And parents need to get back to this. Well, I used to be around the corner playing with my best friend Wendell. All right? We get into it and do something and get in trouble. Wendell's mother would tear me up. All right? Send me home. By the time I got home, she had called my mother. When I got in the house, guess what was waiting for me? Spanking number 2 for the same offense. My father, who I told you was a mailman, as soon as he came home, she told him, and I got number 3.
I know.
That's some due process violations. That's some civil rights violations. Something. There was nowhere where you were supposed to get 3 beatings for 1 crime, but it kept us out of jail.
But today, we have protective services.
Don't even start.
Okay, so we cannot advocate the 3 spanking rule or the barber belt rule.
I will.
Okay, well, let's give parents some good advice about their children not getting in trouble.
But see, that's what's and I know a judge. I'm not going to mention her name right now at all. Oops, I said her. I'm not going to mention this particular judge at all. But when a lot of those cases come before her, she will dismiss them still to this day because that's what we've gotten away from. Now, I'm not saying that you need to break any limbs. I'm not saying that you need to do anything to where a child is bleeding. But in fact, I have another trial that's scheduled to go August 31st, where the mother spanked these 2 little FCC, little badass kids. And they were 2 girls. And you know how girls can get sassy and just when they get to that age. And their aunt took them in as guardian because they couldn't be controlled in their own environment. And they went to school, saw the little welts or something, and now this woman has a case. Prosecutor this past week at the final conference reduced it from a child abuse 2nd all the way down to a child abuse 4 misdemeanor with just a couple of classes. They know they overcharged that case. But and you saw I don't know if you saw the case out of Baton Rouge, where the mother was down there, and she was raising 3 honor roll boys, and their father had been recently incarcerated. And she was trying to make sure that they did not follow in his footsteps, but they were out there running with some little neighborhood boys for the first time, broke into a lady's house, and she put a beating on them. They went to school, school called CPS. Now she's being charged. And so the whole country is somewhat split about that as it relates to, are you on the mother's side, or do you think she went overboard? But I really think that's why we have the problems that we have today. Children have too much control now than what we did. You and I never would have thought about, I'm calling CPS on you, Daddy.
Well, the reason children have too much control today is because we as parents have tried hard to make their life a little better than our life, and we figure that there's got to be an exchange, but sometimes words don't work. In that regard, we'll be back in a few minutes, and we're going to talk about how to protect yourself and your children from your guns.
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? Or just have general legal questions? Watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. Know your rights. Watch Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law, Tuesdays at 5 p.m. here on WHPR, Detroit Live.
You know, one of the things that I wanted to talk with you about is, here's the 4th of July coming up, and everyone wants to celebrate the holiday. So sometimes people bring out their rifles, they bring out their guns, they see them, they don't secure them. What problems are families faced with when this occurs?
It's called murder 2 or involuntary manslaughter. I just cut to the chase. That's what they're facing if they leave those guns and they're accessible to the children in the home, and those children wind up either shooting themselves or shooting one of their, little playmates or siblings.
So the best advice that you can give people is
to get gun locks and or put those guns up out of reach from the children. I was a guy I represented on a car case about 2 months ago. They had gone out to his house. The cops executed a search warrant, and they took the cars, but they had gone in the house. And it's so interesting how different units of the police department are only interested in certain things. These were the car guys, commercial
that's
auto
very
theft.
kind of you to say.
It is, because when you hear what happened.
You know what the commercial auto theft is, don't you?
Cats.
Yeah, but you know what it really is?
What?
That's the Drug Enforcement Unit. They just call it the CATS unit.
Well, you might differ when you hear the end of this story, because they got the search warrant. They went and they took the cars. They went in the house. My guy was growing. He had a grow operation in his house. They walked off and left it all intact. They were not interested, because my guy asked me, it was like, I got some guns in the house too. You think I'm gonna get in trouble? I'm like, you're not supposed to have any guns in the house. I went in the house. They didn't find the guns, but the grow operation was sitting in plain view, taking up the whole back sun porch. And they left the entire operation intact. And the whole point of the story was, I brought that up, is once he told me where the guns were, and I, gave him the best legal advice he needed. One, you're not supposed to have them, period, because of your situation. But you have them where an enterprising, precocious little child could get them.
Let's stop for a minute on this. You have a grow operation, which is very common today in the city and in the suburbs. Had a conversation with a man about it 2 hours ago, in fact.
Okay.
You got guns in the house. You get arrested for having a grow operation, you have guns. What's the charge?
Well, that depends, one, if your grow operation is sanctioned through your medical marijuana card. You're not supposed to have, I think it was 6 plants. But if you are violating the medical marijuana charge, now you're faced with a drug charge, which could very easily be delivery, which is a felony. Then you have the guns in the house, which turns into a felony firearm. So you're looking at a mandatory 2 years in prison, plus whatever charge or time you can get from the delivery of marijuana charge.
Now, in a grow operation, let's just clarify this point. If you have a medical marijuana card and you have a grow operation, you can have up to 4 clients, correct?
I think so. Don't now you're going to wade into an area that I haven't really specialized in, is that medical marijuana law. So I would be more concerned in this situation with how many plants he had, because the clients wouldn't be there. But I think it's 6. I could be wrong. I'm not sure. Is it 6, or if you got 4 clients, can you have 24 plants? I don't know. I'm not sure about that.
6 plants per client.
6. Okay. So how? I guess you would have a book to show how many clients you have. I'm not sure. You got to get Michael Cremorne on here to talk about medical marijuana.
That's your associate, isn't he, or your partner?
I know him very well. He has branched off, and that's all he does now. Him and Matt Abel. Matt Abel runs Cannabis Council. So they might be some great guests if you want to explore that medical marijuana piece.
But getting back to the gun issue, you have any drugs in your house, you're a felon in possession.
If you have had a prior conviction, if you got drugs in the house plus a gun, but you have not had a felony before, you're looking at what's called a felony firearm, or having possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. So you would be facing, like I said earlier, that flat 2 years plus whatever you would get on the underlying drug conviction. Then if you were a prior felon, then you would have, as you said, felon in possession, which would be a whole third charge.
Now, if you're driving the car, for example, and you're under the influence of alcohol, and you take a PBT test and you blow like 0.18,
super drunk,
you have a gun on the seat, you don't have a permit for it, you don't have a license, please tell our viewers what's going to happen.
You can kiss your gun goodbye for about 8 years, because you are not supposed to have a firearm while you are under the influence, and that is a misdemeanor, operating while well, he just said 0.18, so that's super drunk. So that is definitely some jail time, especially if you're in Oakland County, let alone 48th District.
Oh, that court's no friend.
Bring your toothbrush if you're anywhere in Bloomfield Township or in that particular area. But yeah, you will not be able to have your CPL restored to you for about 8 years, and then all of those other sanctions that we talked about if you wound up pleading or being convicted of operating while intoxicated or impaired.
You know, we invite you to call in if you have questions about this. We're having a wonderful time discussing it this evening, but we don't want you to get the brunt of our discussion and end up in jail, because it's just a very serious topic. It's the weekend coming up. Another issue that we have to be concerned about is allowing your children to handle the fireworks display. You see the liability problems that can occur.
See, now you're going to get me into my own personal views and its cynicism.
Well,
okay,
it's welcome.
Okay, fine. Barry, we just had one of the largest fireworks shows in the country yesterday. If it were left up to me, I wouldn't even let these little small towns and villages have their own fireworks displays. Why do the taxpayers need to spend even more money in Royal Oak or Ferndale or Commerce Township or Livonia to have their own little private fireworks show? The city of Detroit used to have 2.1 million people here. Last time I checked, the waterfront, the riverfront was the same size. They didn't shrink it. We now have Hart Plaza. We now have a riverfront that extends past the old News and Free Press plant all the way back to Belle Isle. We can go north all the way up to Campus Martius. I'm sure the numbers were about 900,000 that came down last night. You could empty out every community from here to M59 and bring them into the city for the fireworks and still have room. So we'll move on beyond that. Okay, let them keep their fireworks. But why do we need neighborhood fireworks and M80s in the communities, keeping people up to 1, 2 o'clock in the morning in Detroit, in the hood, shooting off fireworks in the first place? And this is, I told you, you get me all started, because I have very little sympathy for somebody, and it's invariably it's going to happen between now and next week. Somebody's going to wind up starting the weekend with 5 fingers and going home with 3. And I'm like, why would you want to fool around with these things anyway? You know, and you drive through communities, especially in Detroit, and you sit around and you watch these people. Okay, now what? All right, was that exciting? No. But I really think fireworks still need to be banned. They don't serve any useful purpose other than keeping good folk up who got those jobs that need to go to work at 7 o'clock in the morning. I done said my piece. I'm done.
Well, what about the liability issues with children shooting off the fireworks? Supervision, that's the question.
Are you going to go after the manufacturer, or you want to hold the parents accountable as well?
Well, it'd be pretty difficult to go after the manufacturer because most of them are made in Asia.
China.
Well, I was being polite. I said Asia. However, getting to the next issue, you got some kids out there and they're anxious. They want to shoot those rockets, and they just start firing off those rockets at somebody's car while they're driving down the street, distract them. People get injured.
But see, how do you... I'm thinking this through as we're sitting here shortly now, but you've got to be 18 to buy them. So you really don't even have to have parental consent. I can get my big brother to go buy me some fireworks. And now you're going to have to prove that my mother knew I had them. And you're opening up a whole little can of worms there.
My point is, don't you think there should be some parental supervision when fireworks are being used by minors? Our parents should be held responsible.
Think that there should be? Yeah, I think there should be parental supervision with a whole bunch of stuff. But I don't know how you would even go about trying to enforce that. I don't. Especially because, quite frankly, what I've seen, Barry, is the parents are out there. More often than not, it's the older set that is getting injured. You don't really see too many 10 or 11-year-old kids in the ERs because the parents or the older siblings know that those M80s and those other little rocket fireworks are dangerous, and the kids don't necessarily know how to light them. They do have enough sense not to let that 8-year-old do it. But because they're 24 and had that kid when they were 16, they think they know what they're doing, and they wind up in the hospital. For what?
4 fingers left.
Yes, absolutely.
You got the
Absolutely.
point. Absolutely. I remember as a child seeing that. I never forgot it. Someone was holding the firecracker. Next thing,
No thumb.
that's you got it. You can't function without a phone. Now, if people want to get a hold of you and hire you, how do they reach you?
Give me a call at 313-333-4975. We're located out in Southfield, 28475 Greenfield, Suite 102, Southfield, Michigan. But the best way, 24 hours a day, 313-333-4975.
And the major area of your practice, 90% today,
Is criminal. I've waded back into family law. And I always laugh, and this is an old lawyer's joke, but family law is basically criminal law where nobody's been charged yet.
That's actually pretty funny if you think about all the hostility that builds up
Exactly.
and how you have to keep people apart. We're going to take a break. We'll be back in a few moments. Thank you.
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? Or just have general legal questions? Watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. Know your rights. Watch Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law, Tuesdays at 5 p.m. here on WHPR, Detroit Live.
You know, one of the big problems on the weekend is when you and your family, when you're on good terms, decide to go out, home invaders come in your house while you're gone, and you come home and discover them. What do you have a right to do under the law if you discover someone who has invaded your house?
Help them prepare for their funeral arrangements.
Well, let's be realistic.
That is realistic.
We don't ready to get a shotgun out and start blasting away, you know, because you
That's
have,
what the lady. In fact, I'm trying to remember what jurisdiction that was in. But last weekend, Barry, a lady came home with her children and saw an intruder in the home. She was a licensed gun owner, and she shot and killed him. She was, I think, about 30, 31 years old, somewhere along in there. I don't know if that was here locally in Michigan, but I did see it. And you do under the law, and in fact, you know, Michigan expanded theirs not long ago to match Florida's. You have the right to stand your ground. And definitely, if you are in your home and someone invades your home, you have the right to defend yourself with lethal force.
I'm talking about just a little different twist on that.
Okay.
Put your car in the garage. Everybody's getting out of the car. You notice something strange going on in your house. What do? Do you call the police, or do you go in the house blasting away with a gun?
Well, that depends upon what you're comfortable with. If you are a licensed CPO holder, you can go in there and handle that matter. If you are not a licensed CPO holder, you might want to back the car out of the driveway, out of the garage, call 911, and wait for the police to arrive. But, you know, I suppose that would depend upon the situation of the homeowner. You know, if your children are with you, do you want to expose them to any possible danger? Because realistically, you don't know what the intruder has either. You know, and it's not as easy as people think it is really to react under that type of pressure. That's why you find a lot of individuals who even have gone to the gun range and have practiced, and even some that are certified tend sometimes to miss, because it's very easy to perfect your shot sitting or standing there in a gun range when you are not under duress.
My point is, why escalate the situation if you can keep the situation calm so that you don't have a situation where there are hostages or people can get injured? I guess what I'm trying to say is, would you agree with me the best advice is to avoid a confrontation at all costs?
If I'm outside the home, probably so. Um, I guess why I'm still not necessarily to jump completely over that fence with you is because folk have the feeling of being violated. And unless you have had a home invasion happen to you, to where you come home and your house has been ransacked or someone has walked up in the house on you, that is a feeling that some people, especially if when it's happened to women, almost as personal and objectionable as rape.
Well,
Be-
it's particularly offensive to have somebody enter your house and take your belongings when you're not home. I understand that.
Mhm.
And I understand the analogy that you made. But what I'm trying to decide here is how do we avoid escalating the situation?
Well, in that sense, then you would call the police. You would call 911 and tell them what the situation is immediately at hand, that there is someone in the house. You can see movement within your home and ask them to come immediately. You don't know if they have a weapon. And I would probably tell DPD that or 911 that on the phone. I don't know whether or not they are armed. They, in fact, could be armed. I'm afraid for the life of my children. So that call does get escalated up the chain because they still are underserved by about 1,200 officers. So you would want the fastest response time possible.
It's the holiday weekend. I'm having a cookout.
Hmm.
Some of the neighbors are invited over. Some of them bring along their friends that you don't know.
Hmm.
Are you concerned for the welfare and safety of the people around you if you don't know the company you're keeping?
Yes, if this is my cookout I'm having,
It's your cookout.
absolutely. You're responsible for what goes on in your own property. And in fact, I have a case very similar to that right now. It's a homicide case where my client is accused of actually killing a man. It wasn't his property, but he went across the street. He's alleged to have gone across the street to a neighborhood party that they have every time a Mayweather fight happens. They drag out the huge TV, and he was accused of murder. And there was a fight that happened, and people are claiming that he had something to do with it. So again, we go back to that conversation we had at the beginning. You really got to know who you're associating with, and who you allow in your space, whether you are going to a party or whether these people are coming to you.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is don't get paranoid, but know the people around you. Because a lot of things can go wrong, whether it's
Hmm.
someone getting shot, some child getting molested, someone getting drunk and starting a fight. I mean, these are very serious things that can occur.
Yes,
And as a homeowner, you're ultimately held.
liable or responsible for it. You're absolutely right.
Right. So the best advice is
To be, again, limit your association to the people that you know very well. Make a guest list. And have people respond to it. That old RSVP. I want to know who's coming to the party. I even want to know who you're bringing. Barry, I'm inviting you, but I don't necessarily know who this person is you're bringing. Now, it depends upon how well I know you and how much I trust you. But you really need to get a handle on who's coming into your home.
now that leads me to the next question. It's your house, you're having a party. And the party seems to mushroom because people in the neighborhood hear the music and everybody's having a good time. Do you have a right to tell them that they're not welcome?
Absolutely. It's your house, your rules. And you didn't decide to have an open invitation. So you can decline anyone that you want. That's why you need to have the area cordoned off or fenced off. If you're clearly, if you're having a party within your home, you have the right to turn away anybody that knocks at your door. So absolutely.
I can be charged as a trespasser, can't I?
If you decide to come into my home anyway?
Yes.
Yes, not just trespassing, entry without owner's permission. You can be charged with home invasion second, because if you actually force your way into the house and I'm there, that is home invasion in the second degree.
I have an interesting question to ask you. Do you think it's a violation of my rights if you ask me to look in my shoulder bag when I come to your party to see if I'm packing?
No, because you don't have that right against search and seizure by a private person. That right is only against the government. So I can search you as a private individual all day long.
Do you think I've got a right to bring drugs into your house?
Absolutely not. You don't even have a right to bring drugs in your house.
Well, the point I'm trying to make is when you're out socializing, you have to have a certain level of trust and respect for other people.
Yes, you do.
And this carries over to the whole scenario that we're talking about, especially on weekends when people are trying to have leisure time.
Hmm.
Thanks for coming today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for asking me to come. I really enjoyed this myself.
Now, tell the people how they can get a hold of you again.
Once again, my name is Attorney Cliff Woodards. You can reach me at the Detroit Law Center. We're located at 28475 Greenfield, Suite 102, out in Southfield, Michigan, 48076. I guess if you wanted to send me an email, or my telephone number, always 24 hours a day, 313-333-4975.
We have one last caller. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm calling on behalf of a friend of mine. He is a 19-year-old college student, a bit of an athlete. He found himself at a party. He got drunk, and it turns out that he may have had relations with a young lady, 15, turning 16. He didn't know at the time. He thought she was much older. And what are the repercussions to that? Is there any type of defense to that type of behavior? My position, I told him that there was not, but perhaps you have more experience than a layperson, so I just wanted to hear your thoughts on it, and I would listen off air if that's okay.
All right, thank you. You're correct. There is no defense. That is what they used to call statutory rape. And if she was 15 at the time, she was underage and thus not legally able to give consent. Depending upon the prosecutor, what jurisdiction it is, they may offer him what's called a CSC3, criminal sexual conduct in the 3rd degree. They may even plead it down to criminal sexual conduct in the 4th degree. Now, it depends if she was intoxicated herself. I just got through dealing with a case last week with those same almost exact set of facts with it. So sometimes, depending upon the lawyer and the prosecutor and what they want to do with that case, they may, as I said, even turn it into an aggravated assault, depending upon what the young man has going for himself. And in the past, you don't necessarily want to get that criminal sexual conduct on his record, because that will follow him. If he even pleads to the misdemeanor criminal sexual conduct, he will still have to register for 15 years. It will be on the non-public registry, meaning law enforcement can see it, but not the outside world. So the best thing is if it can be reduced to something like an aggravated assault. Very similar to what Evan Reed got with the Detroit Tigers, if you remember that, last summer, where he was in trouble at the Townsend Hotel, and he got the case dismissed. The prosecutor refiled or appealed.
Yes.
They got it back on the docket, and he eventually resolved that with an aggravated assault, nothing sexual on his record, and he was allowed to resume his career.
Pay attention to what the man just said. That
Thank you.
CSC stays with you forever on the sex offenders.
Yep.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Attorney Keller. Appreciate the time.
You're welcome.
All right.